The city of Chicago never truly slept, and neither did its demons. Marcus Blackwood stepped out of the warehouse at 2 a.m, his jaw tight, his shoulders heavy with the weight of negotiations that had dragged on for 6 brutal hours. 3 rival bosses, 1 territory dispute, 0 trust between any of them. But he had won. He always won. At 37 years old, Marcus had built an empire that made grown men tremble at the mere mention of his name. 15 years in this game had taught him how to read people, how to break them, how to make them believe death was a mercy compared to crossing him. Tonight, however, all he wanted was silence. His driver was nowhere to be seen, probably smoking behind the building again. Marcus didn't bother waiting. He walked toward his black Escalade, parked under the flickering streetlight, pulled out his keys, and climbed into the back seat. The door closed with a heavy thunk. Darkness swallowed him whole. Marcus leaned his head back against the leather seat and closed his eyes. Just 5 minutes of peace before the drive home. Just 5 minutes to forget the blood on his hands, the lies on his tongue, the hollow ache in his chest that had never healed since Elena died. Elena. 5 years, and her name still cut through him like broken glass. He reached for the overhead light. "Don't turn on the light." Marcus froze. The voice was small, thin, barely louder than a whisper, and it came from the dark corner of the back seat. He's watching. For 15 years, Marcus Blackwood had survived ambushes, betrayals, assassination attempts, and wars that painted entire streets red. Nothing surprised him anymore. Nothing shook him. But those 4 words stopped his heart cold. He didn't move. His hand hovered in the air, inches from the light switch. Every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. In the far corner of the back seat, pressed against the door like she was trying to disappear into the leather itself, sat a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her clothes were torn and filthy, streaked with dirt and something darker that might have been dried blood. Her hair hung in tangled knots around a face that was too thin, too pale, too haunted for a child her age. But it was her eyes that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. They were red from crying, swollen, exhausted. And yet she wasn't crying now. She was watching him with a steadiness that seemed impossible. Not with fear, not with confusion, with warning. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "How did you get in my car?" The girl didn't answer his questions. Instead, her gaze shifted past him, toward the tinted window, toward the darkness outside. "He let me go," she whispered. "He opened the door and told me to run. I thought I was escaping, but then I saw him follow me. He wanted me to find you." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "Who?" he growled. "Who are you talking about?" The girl's small hand rose slowly, one trembling finger pointing toward the window behind Marcus. "The man with the burned face. He's standing under the streetlight right now. He's been watching since you got in." Marcus didn't turn around. Not yet. He kept his eyes locked on the child's face, searching for any sign of deception, any hint that this was some elaborate trap. But all he saw was terror. Raw, genuine, bone-deep terror. "He has a knife," the girl continued, her voice cracking. "A long one. He showed it to me every night. He said he would cut me into pieces if I screamed." Her eyes finally met Marcus's, and what he saw in them made something ancient and protective stir in his chest. "But he hates you more than he hates me." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and somewhere behind Marcus, beyond the bulletproof glass, footsteps began to approach. Marcus turned his head slowly, his eyes cutting through the tinted glass toward the streetlight 30 meters away. A figure stood beneath its sickly yellow glow, tall, broad-shouldered, motionless as a statue carved from hatred itself. But it was the way the figure stood that made Marcus's stomach twist into knots. The weight shifted to one side, the left leg slightly bent, unable to bear full pressure. A limp. Marcus knew that limp. He had watched it develop 8 years ago, on the worst night of his life. The memory crashed into him like a freight train, unbidden and merciless. Rain, sirens, gunfire ripping through the night. The warehouse job had gone sideways in the worst possible way. Someone had tipped off the police, and suddenly Marcus and his crew were surrounded. Bullets flying from every direction, men dropping like dominoes around him. And Victor Crane, his right hand, his brother in everything but blood, had taken a round to the thigh. He had gone down hard, screaming Marcus's name, reaching out with a bloody hand as the cops closed in. Marcus had looked at Victor. Victor had looked back at him, eyes full of desperate trust. And Marcus had run. He told himself it was survival. He told himself Victor would understand. He told himself there was no other choice. But deep down, Marcus knew the truth. He had sacrificed Victor to save himself, left him bleeding on the concrete floor while he slipped out the back and disappeared into the rainy darkness. Victor took 3 bullets that night, one in the leg, one in the shoulder, one that grazed his face, and left him scarred beyond recognition. The police found him in a pool of his own blood, barely alive. 20 years. That was the sentence. Marcus had visited him once. In the beginning, Victor hadn't said a word, just stared at him through the glass with eyes that promised something far worse than death. Marcus never went back. 3 years ago, the news came like a ghost story whispered in dark corners. Victor Crane had escaped during a prison transfer, killed 2 guards, vanished without a trace. Every contact Marcus had, every resource at his disposal, every favor he could call in turned up nothing. Victor had become smoke, a rumor, a nightmare that might not even be real. Until tonight. "How long?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't take his eyes off the figure under the streetlight. "How long did he have you?" The little girl's voice trembled behind him. 5 days. Maybe 6. I don't know anymore." "What do you mean you don't know?" "He kept me in a room with no windows, no clocks. Just a single light bulb that he turned on whenever he wanted to talk to me." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was even smaller. "He never let me see the sun. I forgot what it looked like." Marcus's hands curled into fists. 5 days, maybe 6. A child, locked in darkness, kept alive for no other reason than to be used as bait. For him, the figure under the streetlight began to move. 1 step, then another. That familiar limp dragging through the silence like a death march. The light caught something in his hand. Metal, long, curved slightly at the tip. A knife. It gleamed under the yellow glow, hungry and patient, as if it had been waiting years for this moment. Because it had, Victor Crane stepped out of the shadow, and for the first time in 8 years, Marcus saw his face, or what was left of it. The right side was still recognizable. Sharp jaw, high cheekbone, the face of the man who had once called Marcus brother. But the left side was a nightmare made flesh. Scar tissue rippled from his temple down to his neck, twisted and melted like candle wax left too close to a flame. His left eye was milky white, dead and unseeing. His lip curled upward on that side, frozen in a permanent sneer. Victor stopped 20 meters from the car. He didn't need to come closer. He knew Marcus could see him now, and slowly, deliberately, Victor Crane raised the knife and pointed it directly at the Escalade, at Marcus, at the child hiding in his back seat. His scarred lips moved, forming words that Marcus couldn't hear through the bulletproof glass. But he didn't need to hear them. He could read them perfectly. "I found you." Victor moved closer. Each step was deliberate, unhurried, like a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. The limp gave his gait an uneven rhythm, a broken metronome counting down to something terrible. 10 meters, 5 meters, 3. Then he was there, standing right outside the car door, close enough that Marcus could see every ridge and valley of scar tissue carved into his ruined face. Victor leaned in, his destroyed face pressed against the tinted window, and even through the thick bulletproof glass, Marcus could see the milky dead eye staring straight at him. The good eye, the right one, burned with something that went beyond hatred, beyond madness. It was patience, the kind of patience that only grew in the darkest cells of a prison, watered by years of planning and dreaming of this exact moment. Victor raised the knife. The tip touched the glass with a soft tap. Once, twice, 3 times. His lips moved, and even without sound, Marcus understood every word. "Come out, Marcus. We have family business to discuss." Family business. The words made no sense. Marcus had no family. Elena was dead. They never had children. His parents had been gone for over a decade. Daniel was his only living relative, and Victor had no connection to him. What family business could a ghost from his past possibly want to discuss? Behind him, the little girl shifted. Her small fingers reached out and grabbed the sleeve of Marcus's jacket, gripping the expensive fabric like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the world. "He told me things," she whispered. "When he kept me in that room, he talked to me every day." Marcus didn't turn around. He kept his eyes locked on Victor's scarred face. "What things?" "He said I was a gift, a present he was going to give you." Her voice cracked, but he also said he was going to take me back. "After you understood." "Understood what?" The girl's grip tightened on his sleeve. "I don't know. He never told me that part. He just kept saying you would understand when you saw my face, that everything would make sense." Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, but none of them connected. A random orphan, A witness to something? A child of someone he had wronged in his long and bloody career? Nothing fit. Outside, Victor seemed to grow bored with waiting. He stepped back from the window, retreating to a distance of about 10 meters, and stood perfectly still. The knife dangled loosely at his side. He wasn't attacking, wasn't forcing his way in. He was waiting. Like he had all the time in the world, like he knew exactly how this night would end. Marcus quickly assessed his situation, and the reality hit him like a punch to the gut. The Escalade was armored, bulletproof glass, reinforced doors, a fortress on wheels that had saved his life more than once. But a fortress was useless without a way to move it. His driver was still missing, probably dead already, if Victor had planned this carefully. And the keys. Marcus closed his eyes, fighting the urge to slam his fist against the seat. The keys were in his coat pocket. His coat was hanging in the back of the car, and to reach the back, he would need to step outside, exactly where Victor wanted him. "Is there another way out?" the girl asked quietly. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. No, there's no other way out. He was trapped, locked inside his own armored vehicle with a child he didn't know, while the man he had betrayed 8 years ago waited patiently outside with a knife and a plan that had been 8 years in the making. Victor raised the knife again, letting the streetlight catch the blade. He smiled, and for the first time since Elena's funeral, Marcus Blackwood felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Fear. Not for himself. For the little girl clutching his sleeve like he was the only thing standing between her and the monster outside. Marcus needed time. Time to think. Time to find a way out of this cage. Time to understand why Victor Crane had chosen tonight, this place, this child, to finally make his move. He turned slightly in his seat, keeping Victor in his peripheral vision while focusing on the girl huddled in the corner. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, as if the question itself was a trap. "Lily," she finally said. "Just Lily." "Lily what?" "I don't have a last name." "Not really. The sisters gave me one for the paperwork, but it's not mine. It belonged to some saint I never heard of." Marcus studied her face in the dim light filtering through the tinted windows. Pale skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, dark circles under eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. But beneath the exhaustion and the fear, there was something else. Defiance. This child had been through hell, and she was still here, still talking, still fighting. "Where do you live?" Marcus asked. "Before he took you." "Street. Mary's orphanage. On the west side, near the old church that burned down." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Street Mary's. He knew that place. Knew it better than he wanted to admit. "How long have you been there?" "Since I was 2. Maybe younger. I don't really remember anything before the orphanage." "And your parents?" Lily's eyes dropped to her lap, where her small hands twisted together nervously. "Sister Catherine told me about my mom. She said my mom was really young when she had me. Just a teenager. She had problems. Drug problems." The girl's voice grew quieter. "She died when I was little. Overdose, they said. I don't remember her face. I don't remember her voice. I just know she's gone and she's never coming back." "What about your father?" "Nobody knows who he is. Sister Catherine said my mom never told anyone. Maybe she didn't know either." Marcus leaned back against the seat, his mind racing through connections he didn't want to make. Street Mary's orphanage. Elena had volunteered there for 3 years before they got married. Every Saturday morning, rain or shine, she would drive to that crumbling building on the west side and spend hours with the children nobody wanted. Marcus had never understood it. He had built his empire on the principle that sentiment was weakness, but Elena was different. Elena believed in things like hope and redemption and second chances. She used to come home with stories about the children, most of them blurred together in Marcus's memory. He had never paid much attention, but one story had stuck with him. Elena had talked about a little girl, a special one, she said, different from the others. "She has these eyes, Marcus, eyes that look right through you, like she knows things she shouldn't know, like she can see the truth even when everyone around her is lying." Elena had called her the girl with speaking eyes. Marcus looked at Lily now, looked at her eyes, and felt a chill run down his spine. Speaking eyes, that was exactly what they were. "He told me something else," Lily said suddenly, breaking through Marcus's thoughts. "The man outside. He said my name isn't really Lily." "What do you mean?" "He said that's what the sisters called me because they found a lily flower in my blanket when my mom left me at the orphanage. But he said my real name, the name my mom gave me, is different." The girl looked up at Marcus, and those speaking eyes held his gaze without flinching. "He said my name is Rose. Lily Rose. That's what my mom wanted me to be called. Rose. The name hit Marcus like a bullet to the chest. Elena's middle name was Rose. Elena Marie Rose Blackwood. She had always loved that name. Always said that if they ever had a daughter, she would name her Rose. But they never had a daughter. Elena died before they could. So why did this orphan, this stranger, this random child that Victor Crane had used as bait, carry the same name that Elena had treasured? Coincidence, Marcus told himself. It had to be coincidence. But deep in his gut, in the place where instincts lived and survival whispered its warnings, Marcus knew nothing about tonight was a coincidence. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The woman who used to visit Street, Mary's, the one who volunteered there. Do you remember her? Lily's eyes flickered with recognition. The pretty lady? Yes. The pretty lady. What do you remember about her? Lily was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting to some distant memory that lived behind her eyes. Sister Catherine called her the Angel of Street Mary's. She came every week, every single week, even when it rained, even when it snowed. She would bring books and toys and cookies she baked herself. The girl's voice softened, but she always spent the most time with me. I never understood why. There were so many other kids, but she always came to me first. Marcus felt his throat tighten. What did she do? When she was with you, she would hold me, read to me, brush my hair and tell me I was beautiful, even when the other kids said I was weird because I never cried. Lily paused, and something fragile crossed her face. Sometimes she would just hug me and cry. I never understood why she was so sad. I would pat her back and tell her it was okay, but she would just cry harder. Elena. Marcus could see her now, could see her sitting on a tiny bed in that rundown orphanage, holding a child that wasn't hers, weeping for reasons she never fully explained. She had told him about her volunteer work, of course, but there had always been something she held back, a shadow behind her smile whenever Street Marys came up in conversation, a sadness that she carried like a secret wound. Now, sitting in his armored car with Victor Crane waiting outside, Marcus finally understood. The memory surfaced slowly, like a corpse rising from deep water. It was 3 years into their marriage. Elena had been distant for weeks, lost in thoughts she wouldn't share. One night, after too much wine and too many tears, she had finally cracked. I helped someone once, she had whispered. A girl. She was so young, Marcus, just 16, pregnant and addicted and completely alone. Marcus had held her while she talked. Her name was Rachel. She was the little sister of someone I used to know. She had no one. Her parents were dead. Her brother was in prison. She had nowhere to go. Elena had helped Rachel through the pregnancy, found her a place to stay, got her into a clinic, held her hand when the baby came. But she couldn't keep the child. She was too sick, too broken. So I took the baby to Street Mary's myself. I promised Rachel I would watch over her daughter, make sure she was safe, make sure she was loved. Marcus remembered the way Elena's voice had cracked. She named the baby Rose. After my middle name, she said it was because I was the only beautiful thing in her life. At the time, Marcus hadn't asked for details. He hadn't cared about some stranger's tragedy. He had comforted Elena, told her she had done the right thing, and never thought about it again. But now, the details mattered. Rachel, a girl with a brother in prison, a brother named Victor Crane. The realization crashed into Marcus like a collapsing building. Lily wasn't a random orphan. She wasn't a stranger that Victor had plucked off the street for his twisted revenge. She was Victor's niece, his own flesh and blood. And Elena had known all along. Elena had been the one to bring Lily into that orphanage. Elena had been the one watching over her for years. Elena had kept this secret buried so deep that even Marcus, who knew every dirty corner of Chicago's underworld, had never suspected. Outside, Victor shifted his weight from one leg to the other. He was still waiting, still patient, because this wasn't just about revenge for being abandoned 8 years ago. This was about family, Victor's family, and somehow, impossibly, Marcus was tangled up in the middle of it in ways he was only beginning to understand. The waiting ended with a single violent crack. Victor's patience had finally snapped. He strode toward the car and slammed the handle of his knife against the window with enough force to make the bulletproof glass shudder in its frame. Once, twice, 3 times. Each impact echoed through the car like a gunshot. Lily flinched backward, pressing herself deeper into the corner. Her fingers dug into Marcus's sleeve so hard he could feel her nails through the fabric. Then Victor stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a radio transmitter. He pressed it against the window and tapped a button. Static filled the car's interior, crackling through the built-in intercom system that Marcus had installed for secure communications. And then Victor's voice came through, clear as broken glass. "I know you can hear me, Marcus. I know you're sitting in there with my niece, trying to figure out how to escape. Trying to think 3 moves ahead like you always did." Victor's scarred face pressed closer to the window. "But you can't think your way out of this one. Not tonight. Tonight, you're going to listen, and then you're going to understand why I've waited 8 years for this moment." Marcus said nothing. His jaw was locked tight, his hands curled into fists at his sides. "When I went to prison," Victor continued, his voice eerily calm, "I had one thing that kept me alive. One hope. My sister, Rachel. She was the only family I had left. The only person in this rotten world who still loved me." The scarred man's voice hardened. "Do you know what happened while I rotted in that cell? While I counted the days and dreamed about getting out? Rachel died. Overdose. Alone in some filthy alley like a piece of garbage." Victor's dead eye seemed to stare straight through the glass, straight into Marcus's soul. "She had a daughter, Marcus. A baby girl she couldn't take care of because she was too sick, too broken, too abandoned. That baby ended up in an orphanage while I sat in prison, helpless, unable to protect my own blood." His voice cracked with something that might have been grief, might have been rage. "If you hadn't left me to die that night, I would have been there for Rachel. I would have gotten her clean. I would have raised her daughter myself. But you ran. You saved your own skin and left me to burn." Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "I didn't know about Rachel. I didn't know about the child." Victor laughed. It was an ugly sound, broken and bitter. "No, you didn't. But your wife did." The words hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. "Elena knew everything. She knew Rachel was my sister. She knew the baby she delivered to Street Mary's was my niece. She knew. And she never told you." Marcus's mind reeled. Elena had kept this from him. For years, she had visited Lily every week, held her, loved her, and never once mentioned that the child was connected to Victor Crane. "Why?" Marcus asked, the word escaping before he could stop it. "Because she was afraid," Victor answered. "Afraid that if you found out, you would see the child as a threat, a loose end, something to be dealt with." Victor's lips curled into a twisted smile. "Your wife was smarter than you, Marcus. She knew what kind of monster she married." Silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Then Victor leaned closer, and his next words turned Marcus's blood to ice. "You think Elena died in a car accident? You really believe that? After all the enemies you've made, you never once questioned how your wife's brakes just happened to fail on a mountain road?" Marcus stopped breathing. "Ask yourself, Marcus, who had the motive? Who had the connections, even from inside a prison, to arrange something like that?" Victor tapped the knife against the glass one final time. "I took her from you, your wife, your unborn child. I took them both. And now I'm going to take the last thing you have left." His dead eye shifted toward Lily. "I'm going to take your soul." Marcus couldn't breathe. 5 years. For 5 years, he had lived with the grief of losing Elena. For 5 years, he had replayed that phone call in his mind. The officer's voice, calm and professional, telling him that his wife's car had gone off a cliff. Brake failure, tragic accident, nothing anyone could have done. He had buried her on a rainy Tuesday, stood at her grave while the sky wept and promised himself that he would never love anything again, because love was weakness, and weakness got people killed. But it hadn't been an accident. It had never been an accident. "You're lying," Marcus said, his voice shaking with a rage he could barely contain. "You were in prison. Maximum security. There's no way you could have arranged a hit from behind bars." Victor's laugh crackled through the intercom. "Marcus, you taught me everything I know. You think I didn't learn how to reach people on the outside? How to call in favors? How to make things happen even when I was locked in a cage?" Victor's scarred face twisted into something resembling pride. "It took me 2 years to find the right people. 2 years to plan every detail. The mechanic who cut her brake lines. The witness who disappeared before the investigation went anywhere. The coroner who ruled it an accident without looking too closely." His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "I couldn't kill you directly. You were too protected, too careful. But Elena? Elena was soft. She believed in goodness and charity and helping people who didn't deserve it." Victor pressed his hand against the glass, fingers splayed like he was trying to reach through and grab Marcus by the throat. "She was pregnant, you know. I found that out later. 3 months along, you were going to be a father, Marcus. Can you imagine that? A monster like you, raising a child?" Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. He had known about the pregnancy, The police had told him when they recovered Elena's body. She had been keeping it a secret, waiting for the right moment to surprise him. That surprise never came. I took the thing you loved most, Victor continued. Your wife, your unborn child. I took them both, and I made sure you would never get them back. His dead eye gleamed with satisfaction. And now I'm going to finish what I started. I'm going to take your soul. Behind Marcus, a small voice cut through the horror like a knife. He killed her? Marcus turned. Lily was staring at him, her speaking eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Her small hands were trembling, clutching the fabric of her torn dress. The pretty lady who used to hold me, Lily whispered. The angel of Street Marys. He killed her? Marcus couldn't speak. The words lodged in his throat like broken glass. She was going to have a baby, Lily continued, her voice cracking. Sister Catherine told me once. She said the angel was so happy because she was finally going to be a mother. And then she stopped coming. Sister Catherine cried for days. Tears spilled down Lily's hollow cheeks. I thought she forgot about me. I thought she stopped loving me because I wasn't good enough. Something shattered inside Marcus's chest. He looked at this broken child, this orphan who had been abandoned and kidnapped and terrorized, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Elena had loved this girl, had held her and cried over her, and visited her every single week for years. Elena, who couldn't have children of her own, had poured all her maternal love into this one small soul. Lily wasn't just Victor's niece. She was Elena's daughter in every way that mattered, and through some cruel twist of fate, she was now sitting in Marcus's car, looking at him with those speaking eyes that seemed to reach straight into his blackened heart. An invisible thread stretched between them, Elena's thread, connecting the man she had married to the child she had loved. And Marcus finally understood why Victor had chosen this particular form of torture. He wasn't just going to kill Lily. He was going to make Marcus watch. Lily wiped her tears with the back of her dirty hand, but more kept falling. She was trying to be brave. Marcus could see that, trying to hold herself together the way children shouldn't have to learn. Then she looked up at him, and something shifted in her expression. There's something else, she said quietly. Something he told me over and over. I didn't understand it, but he kept saying it like it was the most important thing in the world. Marcus felt his stomach clench. What did he say? Lilo's brow furrowed as she tried to remember the exact words. He said my mom wasn't the only one who knew the secret. He said there was a man who met my mom one night at a bar. They spent the night together, and then he disappeared, just left without saying goodbye. She paused, her speaking eyes searching Marcus's face. He said that man was my real father, my blood father, and he said that man didn't even know I existed. The world stopped spinning. Marcus felt like someone had reached into his chest and ripped out his heart with bare hands. 9 years ago, before Elena, before the marriage, before he understood what it meant to love someone more than himself, 9 years ago, Marcus had been a different man, colder, emptier, running from one meaningless night to another, filling the void inside him with alcohol and strangers, and the temporary warmth of bodies he would forget by morning. One of those nights had been at a bar on the south side, a place where nobody asked questions and everyone had secrets. There had been a girl, young, too young probably, though Marcus hadn't asked. She had long dark hair and sad eyes and a laugh that sounded like it was trying too hard to be happy. They had drunk together until the room blurred, talked about nothing and everything, ended up in a motel room where the sheets smelled like cigarettes and regret. By morning, Marcus was gone. No note, no number, no name. He had never looked back, never thought about her again. But he remembered one thing, her name. The girl had told him her name when they first met, back when he was still pretending to be a gentleman. Rachel. Her name was Rachel. The air in the car turned to ice. Marcus stared at Lily, stared at her dark hair that was just like his, at her stubborn jaw that mirrored his own, at those speaking eyes that Elena had fallen in love with before he ever knew they existed. Outside, Victor's laughter exploded through the intercom. It was a wild sound, unhinged, the laughter of a man who had spent 8 years planning this moment and was finally watching it unfold. Now you understand, Victor howled. Now you finally see what I've been waiting to show you. His scarred face pressed against the glass, his good eye blazing with triumph. The child in your car, Marcus? The little girl you've been sitting next to this whole time? She's not just my niece. She's not just some random orphan Elena decided to save. Victor's voice dropped to a poisonous whisper. She's your daughter, your flesh and blood, the child you created when you used my sister like a toy and threw her away. Marcus couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at Lily while his entire understanding of reality collapsed around him. You destroyed Rachel's life, Victor continued. You got her pregnant and abandoned her. She was never the same after that night. She spiraled into drugs and despair because the father of her child was a ghost who didn't even remember her face. His voice rose to a scream. And now I'm going to kill your daughter right in front of you. I'm going to make you watch while I take back everything you stole from my family. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Lily, his daughter, the child he never knew existed, and something ancient and primal stirred to life inside him, something that felt like purpose. A storm raged inside Marcus Blackwood. Guilt crashed against his ribs like waves against jagged rocks. 9 years ago, he had walked away from a woman without a second thought. He had used her body to fill an emptiness he didn't understand and left her with a child she couldn't raise alone. Rachel had spiraled into addiction. Rachel had died in an alley like garbage. Rachel had suffered every single day since that night, and Marcus had been living in mansions and counting money, and never once wondering what happened to the sad girl with dark hair, who laughed like she was trying not to cry. Pain followed the guilt, deep, throbbing pain that radiated from the center of his chest. Elena had known. His wife, the woman he loved more than his own life, had known the truth for years. She had held Lily every week, watched over her like a guardian angel, and never said a word. Not because she was being cruel, but because she was protecting him from a truth that would have destroyed him. And Victor had killed her for it. Rage came next, white-hot and blinding. Victor Crane had murdered Elena, had killed Marcus's unborn child, had kidnapped and tortured an 8-year-old girl for 5 days, just to orchestrate this moment of revelation and suffering. But beneath the guilt and pain and rage, something else was rising. Something Marcus had never felt before in his entire miserable life. It was fierce and primal and absolutely unshakable. It was the instinct to protect. Marcus looked at Lily. Really looked at her. He saw the dark circles under her eyes from 5 days without proper sleep, the hollows in her cheeks from being starved, the bruises on her thin arms from being grabbed too hard, the terror that lived behind her courage like a shadow she couldn't escape. This child had suffered because of him, because of choices he made years ago, because of a night he couldn't even remember properly, because he had been careless and selfish and blind to consequences. But that ended tonight. Marcus pulled out his phone. His hands were steady now. The storm inside had settled into something cold and clear and utterly focused. He dialed a number he knew by heart and pressed the phone to his ear. Daniel answered on the second ring. Marcus, it's 3 a.m. What? Listen to me carefully, Marcus interrupted. I need you to gather everyone. Send them to Street Mary's orphanage on the west side. Protect that place like it's our main warehouse. Armed guards at every entrance. Nobody gets in or out without your permission. What? Why? What's going on? Don't ask questions. Just do it. Now. Marcus ended the call before Daniel could respond. He turned to Lily and held out the phone. Do you know how to use this? Lily nodded slowly, confusion mixing with the fear in her eyes. If I don't come back in 10 minutes, Marcus said, his voice low and firm. You press this green button. It will call my brother Daniel. When he answers, you say 2 words, code red. Then you tell him this address. Can you do that? Lily took the phone with trembling hands. Code red, she repeated. And the address. Good girl. Marcus reached for the door handle, but a small hand shot out and grabbed his sleeve. Wait. He turned back. Lily's speaking eyes were glistening with fresh tears, but she wasn't crying. She was holding them back with a strength no child should need to possess. You're coming back, right? Her voice cracked. You're not going to leave me like everyone else? The question pierced through every wall Marcus had built around his heart. Please, Lily whispered. I don't want to lose anyone else. The pretty lady is gone. My mom is gone. Everyone always leaves. Marcus looked at his daughter. The daughter he never knew he had. And for the first time in his 37 years on this earth, he made a promise that meant everything. I'll come back, he said. I promise. Marcus stepped out of the car and into the cold night air. The door closed behind him with a heavy thunk, sealing Lily inside the armored fortress. She was safe for now, protected by bulletproof glass and reinforced steel. But safety was temporary, and Victor was waiting. The scarred man stood 20 feet away, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the streetlight. His knife caught the light as he slowly spun it between his fingers, a casual gesture that spoke of years of practice, years of waiting, years of planning this exact moment. Finally, Victor said, his ruined lips twisting into a smile. I was starting to think you'd lost your nerve, that you'd stay in that car like a coward and watch me cut through the glass to get to the girl. Marcus said nothing. He walked forward, his footsteps echoing against the empty pavement. "The great Marcus Blackwood," Victor continued, spreading his arms wide in mock welcome. "The king of Chicago's underworld. The man who built an empire on blood and betrayal. I thought you'd have more fight in you. But then again, that was before your pretty wife went off a cliff." Marcus stopped 10 feet from Victor, close enough to see every ridge of scar tissue on his former lieutenant's face, close enough to smell the prison stench that still clung to his clothes, close enough to look into that one dead eye and see nothing but madness staring back. "You killed Elena," Marcus said, his voice flat and cold as winter steel. "You murdered my wife and my unborn child. You kidnapped my daughter and tortured her for 5 days." Victor's smile widened. "Your daughter? 5 minutes ago, you didn't even know she existed. What gives you the right to call yourself her father?" "Blood." "Blood?" Victor laughed. "Blood is nothing. I have her blood too. Rachel was my sister. That makes Lily my family as much as yours." Marcus took another step forward. "Tonight, only one of us is walking away alive." Victor stopped spinning his knife. His grip tightened around the handle. "I was hoping you'd say that." He lunged. Despite the limp, Victor moved with terrifying speed. 8 years of hatred had been compressed into this single moment, and he unleashed it all in one explosive burst. Marcus twisted sideways, feeling the blade whisper past his neck. He grabbed Victor's wrist and drove his elbow into the scarred man's ribs. Victor grunted but didn't stop. He ripped his arm free and swung again, this time aiming low. The blade caught Marcus's thigh, slicing through fabric and flesh. Pain shot up his leg, but Marcus ignored it. He had felt worse. He had survived worse. They circled each other, 2 predators locked in a dance of death. Victor attacked again, fast, brutal, relentless. Marcus blocked what he could and dodged what he couldn't, but he was out of practice. Years of letting others do his fighting had made him soft. The knife found his shoulder. It sank in deep, scraping against bone before Victor yanked it free. Blood poured down Marcus's arm, soaking his expensive shirt, dripping onto the pavement in a steady rhythm. His vision blurred. His knees wanted to buckle, but then he looked toward the car. Through the tinted glass, he could see a small pale face pressed against the window. Lily was watching. Her speaking eyes were wide with terror, her small hands flat against the glass as if she was trying to reach him. She was counting on him. For the first time in her life, someone had promised not to leave her, and Marcus Blackwood was not going to break that promise. He straightened his spine, he raised his fists, and he stepped forward into the fight again. The fight was brutal and ugly. No elegance, no strategy, just 2 men tearing at each other with everything they had left. Victor slashed again, but his movements were growing sloppy. The limp slowed him down. The years in prison had made him vicious but not disciplined. Marcus caught Victor's wrist mid-swing and twisted hard. Bone cracked. Victor screamed as the knife clattered to the pavement. He threw a wild punch with his other hand, but Marcus was ready. He ducked under the blow and drove his fist into Victor's stomach with every ounce of strength he had left. Victor doubled over, gasping for air. Marcus didn't give him time to recover. He grabbed Victor by the collar and slammed him onto the ground. The impact knocked what little breath remained from Victor's lungs. Before the scarred man could move, Marcus was on top of him. His hands wrapped around Victor's throat, and he squeezed. Victor's good eye bulged. His scarred face turned red, then purple. His hands clawed weakly at Marcus's arms, but he had no strength left. 8 years of hatred had burned through him like wildfire, leaving nothing but ash. "This is for Elena," Marcus growled through gritted teeth. "For my child. For every day Lily spent in that basement because of you." Victor's lips moved, but no sound came out. His body convulsed beneath Marcus's weight. 1 more minute. 1 more minute and it would all be over. Then Victor managed to choke out a single sentence. "Do it. Kill me. Show your daughter what kind of monster her father really is." Marcus's hands faltered. He looked toward the car. Lily was still pressed against the window, her small face illuminated by the distant streetlight. Her speaking eyes were fixed on him, watching every moment of this brutal scene. She was watching her father strangle a man to death. Elena's voice echoed through Marcus's memory, soft and clear as the day she had spoken the words. "Violence breeds violence, Marcus. If you ever want to be a father, you need to learn how to forgive. You need to break the cycle, or it will consume everyone you love." Marcus looked down at Victor, at the ruined face twisted with hatred, at the dead eye that saw nothing but revenge, at the man who had spent 8 years letting bitterness eat away his soul until there was nothing human left inside. Is this what Marcus wanted to become? Is this the man he wanted Lily to see? His grip loosened. Victor gasped, sucking in desperate lungfuls of air. Marcus stood up slowly, his bloody hands hanging at his sides. He took a step back, then another, until there was enough distance between them that Victor couldn't reach him. "I'm not going to kill you," Marcus said quietly. Victor stared up at him in disbelief. "Not because you deserve to live. You don't. Not after what you did to Elena. Not after what you did to Lily." Marcus's voice hardened. "But my daughter doesn't need to see her father become a murderer. She's seen enough violence to last a lifetime. She doesn't need to carry that image forever." Victor's face contorted with rage. He rolled onto his side, reaching for the knife that lay a few feet away. But before his fingers could close around the handle, a new sound cut through the night. Sirens. Distant, but growing closer. Red and blue lights flickered at the end of the street, painting the buildings in alternating colors. Someone had called the police. Victor froze. His good eye darted between Marcus and the approaching lights. The calculation was clear on his scarred face. Fight and die, or run and survive. He chose survival. With a snarl of pure hatred, Victor scrambled to his feet and limped toward the darkness of a nearby alley. "This isn't over," he spat over his shoulder. "I'll find her again. I'll find you both. And next time, I won't play games." Then the shadows swallowed him whole. The sirens grew louder until they filled the entire street with wailing sound. 3 squad cars screeched to a halt, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights in a prison yard. Officers poured out with weapons drawn, shouting commands that blurred together into meaningless noise. But one figure moved with purpose through the chaos. Detective Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the lead car, her badge glinting under the streetlights. She was in her mid-30s, with sharp eyes that had seen too much evil and a jaw set with the determination of someone who refused to let that evil win. For 5 days, she had been hunting. 5 days since a little girl named Lily vanished from Street Mary's orphanage without a trace. 5 days of dead ends and false leads and sleepless nights spent staring at a photo of a child with speaking eyes. Sarah had promised Sister Catherine she would find the girl. She had promised herself she wouldn't fail. Now, surveying the scene before her, she struggled to make sense of what she was seeing. A black Escalade parked under a flickering streetlight, blood pooling on the pavement, a man standing alone in the middle of the street, his expensive suit torn and soaked with crimson. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She knew that man. Everyone in Chicago law enforcement knew Marcus Blackwood, the untouchable crime lord, the Shadow King who controlled half the city's underworld but somehow never left enough evidence to arrest. He had been investigated 17 times in the past decade, and 17 times the cases had collapsed. "Blackwood," Sarah called out, her hand resting on her holster. "Don't move." Marcus didn't move. He stood perfectly still, his wounded arm hanging limply at his side, his eyes fixed on the armored car behind him. "I need medical attention," he said calmly. "And so does the child in that vehicle." Sarah's heart stuttered. Child. She gestured for 2 officers to approach the Escalade while she kept her focus on Marcus. "What child? What are you talking about?" Before Marcus could answer, the car door swung open. A small figure tumbled out and hit the pavement running. But she didn't run toward the police. She didn't run toward the safety of the officers with their uniforms and badges and promises of protection. She ran straight to Marcus Blackwood, her thin arms wrapped around his leg, clutching him with a desperation that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The girl buried her face against his blood-soaked trousers like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tried to swallow her whole. "Don't let them take me away," Lily whispered loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Please, I want to stay with you." Sarah stared at the scene in disbelief. In 15 years on the force, she had rescued dozens of kidnapping victims. She knew how they behaved. They ran toward authority, toward safety, toward anyone who represented the opposite of their captor. They did not cling to men like Marcus Blackwood. "Step away from the child," Sarah ordered, moving closer. "Now." Marcus looked down at Lily, and something in his expression made Sarah hesitate. It wasn't the cold calculation she expected from a crime boss. It was something softer, something almost human. "The man who kidnapped her is named Victor Crane," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the blood loss. "He escaped into that alley approximately 2 minutes ago. He's armed with a knife and extremely dangerous." Sarah gestured for 2 officers to pursue while keeping her eyes locked on Marcus. "And who are you to this girl? Why is she holding on to you like you're her lifeline?" Marcus placed his uninjured hand gently on Lily's head. "Because I'm her father." Sarah almost laughed. "Her father? The file says she's an orphan. No known parents. Are you telling me he is my father?" Lily's small voice cut through the tension. She turned her head to look at Sarah, and those speaking eyes held a certainty that no 8-year-old should possess. He saved me. The bad man was going to kill me, and he saved me. He's my father. I know it. Sarah looked from the crime lord to the orphan and back again. Nothing about this night made any sense, but somehow, impossibly, she believed them. The ambulance ride was a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Marcus sat on the stretcher with his back against the wall, ignoring the paramedic who was trying to examine his shoulder wound. His eyes never left Lily, who sat on the opposite stretcher wrapped in a thin emergency blanket, looking smaller than any child should look. When they arrived at Chicago General, the emergency room erupted into controlled chaos. Nurses rushed forward with gurneys and equipment. Doctors barked orders. Someone tried to wheel Marcus toward one examination room, while another team guided Lily toward a different wing. Lily screamed. It wasn't a loud scream. It was small and broken, the sound of an animal that had been cornered too many times. "No!" She thrashed against the nurse's gentle grip. "No, I won't go. Don't take me away from him." Marcus ripped his arm free from the orderly, trying to hold him down. "Let her stay with me," he commanded. His voice carried the authority of a man who had spent 15 years giving orders that were never questioned. The medical staff hesitated, looking at each other in confusion. "Sir, we need to examine you both separately. Protocol requires I don't care about your protocol." Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides, ignoring the blood dripping from his shoulder onto the pristine hospital floor. He knelt beside Lily's gurney and took her small hand in his. "I'm right here," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily's panic slowly subsided. Her breathing steadied. Her grip on his hand tightened like a drowning person clutching a lifeline. The doctor in charge, a tired woman in her 50s with gray streaking her dark hair, assessed the situation and made a decision. "Fine, we'll examine them in the same room, but I need everyone to cooperate." For the next hour, Marcus sat beside Lily's bed while doctors and nurses worked around them. His shoulder was cleaned, stitched, and bandaged. The wound was deep but had missed any major arteries. He would carry a scar, but he would heal. Lily's examination took longer. The doctors spoke in hushed tones, but Marcus heard every word. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, signs of psychological trauma consistent with prolonged captivity, bruising on her arms and legs, minor cuts that had been left untreated. 5 days. Victor had kept her in darkness for 5 days, starving her, terrifying her, breaking her down piece by piece just to use her as a weapon against Marcus. When the medical team finally left them alone, Marcus found himself sitting in a plastic chair beside Lily's bed, completely at a loss. He had negotiated with killers. He had survived assassination attempts. He had built an empire from nothing and defended it against enemies who wanted him dead. But he had no idea how to comfort a child. Lily lay under the thin hospital blanket, an IV drip attached to her arm delivering fluids her body desperately needed. Her speaking eyes watched him with an intensity that made him feel stripped bare. "Are you really my father?" The question hung in the sterile air between them. Or was he lying? The bad man lies a lot. Maybe he made it all up to hurt you. Marcus took a slow breath. "I don't know for certain," he admitted. "We'll need to do a DNA test to be sure. They'll take some blood, compare it to mine, and then we'll know the truth." Lily considered this. "What if the test says you're not my father?" Marcus looked at this broken, brave little girl who had survived horrors no child should ever face. He looked at her speaking eyes that reminded him of Elena. He looked at her stubborn jaw that might have come from him, and he made another promise. "It doesn't matter what the test says. I'm not sending you back to the orphanage. I'm not letting you go back to a life where no one protects you." Lily's eyes widened. "You promise?" "I promise." A tiny smile flickered across Lily's face, the first smile Marcus had seen from her. "You make a lot of promises," she said softly. "Sister Catherine always said adults promise things and then forget. She said not to believe promises because they're just words." Marcus leaned forward, his dark eyes meeting her speaking ones. "Then I'll prove Sister Catherine wrong." Daniel Blackwood arrived at Chicago General just after 4 in the morning. He found his brother standing alone in the hospital corridor, staring through a window at the small figure sleeping in the bed beyond. Marcus's shoulder was wrapped in fresh bandages, his suit jacket discarded, his white shirt stained with dried blood that no one had bothered to clean. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. "I got your message about Street. Mary's," Daniel said, stopping beside his brother. "I sent 12 men. The orphanage is locked down tight. Nobody's getting in or out without our permission." Marcus didn't turn away from the window. "Good." Daniel waited for more, but Marcus remained silent, his eyes fixed on the sleeping child. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" Daniel finally asked. "Because from what I've pieced together, you got into a knife fight with a ghost, ended up in the emergency room, and somehow acquired a daughter in the process." Marcus let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Victor Crane is alive." Daniel's face went pale. "That's impossible. He died in prison 3 years ago." The reports said. The reports were wrong. He escaped during a transfer and spent the last 3 years planning his revenge. Marcus finally turned to face his younger brother. "He killed Elena, cut her brake lines and watched her drive off that cliff. He murdered my wife and my unborn child, and I never knew." Daniel staggered backward as if he'd been punched. "Elena? Victor killed Elena, but we investigated that accident. We had our own people examine. Our people missed it. Or Victor paid them to miss it. It doesn't matter now." Marcus gestured toward the window. "That girl in there. Her name is Lily. Her mother was Rachel Crane, Victor's sister." Daniel's eyes widened. "Rachel Crane? The junkie who overdosed a few years back? What does she have to do with I slept with her once, 9 years ago? Before Elena. Before any of this." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Lily is my daughter." Elena knew the whole time. She helped Rachel deliver the baby and brought her to Street Mary's. She spent years watching over Lily, protecting her, loving her like her own child. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, struggling to process the avalanche of revelations. "You have an 8-year-old daughter you never knew existed? And Elena kept this from you the entire time you were married?" "She was protecting Lily from me. From this life. From everything I represent." Marcus's voice cracked. "She was right to do it." Daniel leaned against the wall, his mind racing. "What are you going to do now? Victor is still out there. He's not going to stop until he finishes what he started. I want every resource we have focused on finding him. Call in favors, offer rewards, check every safe house, every contact, every shadow in this city. I want Victor Crane found within 48 hours. And then," Marcus's jaw tightened, "and then I'm going to end this, permanently." Daniel nodded slowly, but something else was troubling him. "What about the girl? You can't hunt Victor and take care of a child at the same time. You can't run the organization and play father. It doesn't work that way." Marcus turned back to the window. Lily had shifted in her sleep, her small hand reaching out toward the empty chair beside her bed. Even unconscious, she was searching for someone to hold on to. "I've spent 37 years making wrong choices," Marcus said quietly, "building an empire on blood and fear, hurting people, destroying lives, becoming the kind of monster that children have nightmares about." He placed his palm against the cold glass. "Maybe it's time I did something right for once." Morning light filtered through the hospital windows, casting pale rectangles across Lily's bed. She had slept fitfully through the night, waking twice from nightmares that left her gasping and reaching for Marcus's hand. Each time, he had been there. Each time, his presence had been enough to calm her back to sleep. Now she sat propped against pillows, looking slightly better than she had the night before. The IV fluids had restored some color to her cheeks. The doctor said she was recovering physically, but the wounds that couldn't be seen were another matter entirely. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, a notebook in her hand and a recording device in her pocket. "I need to take Lily's statement," she said, her voice professional but not unkind, "about what happened during the 5 days she was held captive." Marcus stood from his chair. "I'm staying." Sarah shook her head. "Standard protocol requires that witness interviews be conducted privately, especially with children. There could be influence. Intentional or otherwise, I won't talk without him." Lily's small voice cut through the argument. Her speaking eyes were fixed on Sarah with a determination that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. "He's my father. If he leaves, I won't say anything." Sarah studied the girl for a long moment, then glanced at Marcus. Whatever she saw in his face made her sigh and pull up a chair. "Fine, but you don't speak unless she asks you a direct question. Understood?" Marcus nodded and sat back down beside Lily's bed. Sarah pressed record. "Lily, can you tell me about the place where the man kept you? What did it look like?" Lily's hands twisted together in her lap. "It was underground. A basement, I think. There were no windows. No way to know if it was day or night." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "There was only one light, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. He would turn it on when he wanted to talk to me. The rest of the time, I was in the dark." Sarah wrote something in her notebook. "How often did he come to see you?" "Once a day, maybe twice. He would bring food sometimes. A piece of bread, some water. Never enough." "Did he hurt you physically?" Lily shook her head slowly. "Not really. He grabbed my arms hard sometimes, pushed me when I didn't do what he said, but mostly he just talked. What did he talk about? Lily's eyes drifted to Marcus. Him, the bad man, talked about him all the time. Sarah leaned forward. Can you tell me what he said? He said there was a man named Marcus Blackwood who destroyed his family. He said this man was evil and needed to be punished. He made me memorize things, scripts, things I was supposed to say when I finally met Marcus. Marcus felt his chest constrict. What kind of scripts? Sarah shot him a warning look, but Lily was already answering. He made me practice every night, over and over until I got it perfect. I was supposed to say, I am your father's debt. The debt must be paid in blood. The words fell into the room like stones dropped into still water. Marcus closed his eyes. His daughter, this innocent child, had been programmed like a weapon, trained to deliver a message of hatred that had nothing to do with her. There was more. Lily continued quietly. He had pictures on the walls. Lots of pictures. Pictures of what? Of him. Lily pointed at Marcus. And a pretty woman with dark hair. The same lady from the orphanage. The angel. Elena. Victor had kept photographs of Marcus and Elena on his basement walls like some kind of twisted shrine. He talked to the pictures at night. When he thought I was sleeping, he would stand in front of them and whisper about all the things he was going to do. How he was going to make them suffer. How he was going to take everything they loved. Sarah stopped writing. She looked at Marcus, and for the first time since they had met, there was something other than suspicion in her eyes. She saw his hands trembling, saw the guilt carving lines into his face, saw a man confronting the consequences of a life built on violence and betrayal. Sarah Mitchell hated the Mafia, hated everything Marcus Blackwood represented. But in this moment, she saw something she hadn't expected. She saw a father whose heart was breaking. 24 hours passed like 24 years. Marcus barely slept. He sat in the plastic chair beside Lily's bed, watching her breathe, counting the seconds between each rise and fall of her small chest. Nurses came and went. Doctors checked her vitals and nodded with cautious optimism. Daniel called with updates on the search for Victor. Nothing yet, but they were getting closer. Then, on the second morning, a young doctor appeared in the doorway with a manila envelope in her hands. Mr. Blackwood, the results are back. Could you step outside for a moment? Marcus looked at Lily. She was awake now, watching him with those speaking eyes that seemed to understand far more than any child should. Go, she said quietly. I'll be okay. He squeezed her hand once and followed the doctor into the hallway. They walked to a small consultation room at the end of the corridor. The doctor closed the door behind them and gestured for Marcus to sit. He remained standing. Just tell me. The doctor opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper filled with numbers and technical language that meant nothing to Marcus. The DNA comparison was conclusive, she said. The probability of paternity is 99.97%. She looked up from the paper. She's your biological daughter, Mr. Blackwood. There's no doubt. Marcus took the paper from her hands. The words blurred before his eyes. Numbers swam across the page like fish in murky water, but one phrase stood out with perfect clarity. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Thank you, he heard himself say. I need a moment. The doctor nodded and left him alone. Marcus stood in the empty consultation room, holding the paper that confirmed everything Victor had said, everything he had feared, everything he had hoped. Lily was his daughter, his flesh and blood, his consequence. The memory surfaced without warning, pulling him back 9 years to a night he had buried so deep he almost forgot it existed. A bar on the south side of Chicago. Cheap whiskey and cheaper conversation. A girl sitting alone in the corner with dark hair and sad eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach her face. Rachel. She had been beautiful in a fragile way, like glass that had been cracked but hadn't shattered yet. They had talked for hours about nothing that mattered. She told him she was running from something. He told her he was running from everything. They drank until the world turned soft and distant. They ended up in a motel room where the sheets smelled like cigarettes and loneliness. By morning, Marcus was gone. No note, no number, no second thoughts. He had walked away from Rachel the same way he walked away from everyone back then. Carelessly, selfishly, without once considering that his actions might create ripples that would spread for years. And now those ripples had become a tidal wave. Rachel had gotten pregnant. She had spiraled deeper into addiction. She had given birth to a daughter she couldn't raise, and died in an alley before that daughter ever knew her face. All because Marcus had wanted one meaningless night. He looked down at the paper in his trembling hands. Lily had spent 8 years in an orphanage, believing she was unwanted. She had been kidnapped, starved, terrorized by a madman seeking revenge. She had survived horrors that would have broken most adults. And through it all, she had never known that her father was alive. But he was out there somewhere, building an empire on blood and money, never once thinking about the daughter he had created and abandoned. Marcus folded the paper carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he walked back to Lily's room. She was sitting up in bed, her speaking eyes tracking him as he entered. She didn't ask what the doctor had said. She just waited. Marcus sat down in the chair beside her bed. He took her small hand in his, and for the first time in his life, he spoke words that terrified him more than any enemy ever could. Lily, the test results came back. I am your father, your real father, and I am so sorry it took me this long to find you. The phone rang at 3 p.m, shattering the fragile peace of Lily's hospital room. Marcus answered on the first ring. We have a problem. Daniel's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. A big one. Marcus stepped away from Lily's bed, lowering his voice. What happened? Victor hit Street Mary's. About an hour ago. He got past our perimeter somehow. By the time our guys realized what was happening, he was already inside. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Casualties? Nobody dead. Sister Catherine tried to stop him and took a hit to the head. She's at another hospital now. Concussion, but stable. The kids are shaken up, but physically okay. Then what did he want? Daniel paused. When he spoke again, his voice was grim. He left a message, wrote it on the wall of the main hallway. In blood, Marcus closed his eyes. What does it say? The child belongs to the Crane family. Return her, or I will take something else. The words echoed in Marcus's skull like a death sentence. Victor wasn't giving up. He wasn't running scared. He was escalating. There's more, Daniel continued. He carved something into Sister Catherine's desk. An address. Our address. Marcus. The family estate. He knows where we live. He knows everything. 8 years of planning, remember? He probably has blueprints of every property we own. Marcus turned to look at Lily. She was watching him with those speaking eyes, already sensing that something was wrong. I'm moving her, Marcus said. Today. Right now. Get the estate locked down. Triple the guards. Nobody gets within a mile of the property without my authorization. Already done. But Marcus, if Victor knows the location, then we'll be ready for him. Marcus ended the call and walked back to Lily's bed. She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. The fear was already creeping back into her eyes, pushing out the fragile hope that had started to grow there. He came back, didn't he? She whispered. The bad man. Marcus nodded slowly. He went to Street Mary's. He hurt Sister Catherine. Lily's face crumpled. Is she okay? Is Sister Catherine going to die? She's going to be fine. The doctors are taking care of her. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and took both of Lily's hands in his. But we can't stay here anymore. I'm taking you somewhere safe. A big house outside the city with lots of guards and high walls. Nobody will be able to get to you there. Lily's lower lip trembled. He found me at the orphanage. He found me in your car. He finds me everywhere I go. Her voice broke. You won't let him take me again, will you? Promise me. Promise you won't let him put me back in that basement. Marcus slid off the bed and knelt on the floor so his eyes were level with hers. Listen to me, Lily. Listen very carefully. He placed his hands on her thin shoulders, feeling how fragile she was, how breakable. I will die before I let anyone touch you again. Do you understand? Victor Crane will have to go through me to reach you. And I promise you, he won't survive the attempt. Lily stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something she had never done before. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. It wasn't a tentative hug. It wasn't the polite embrace of a child meeting a stranger. It was the desperate grip of a daughter holding on to her father for dear life. Marcus froze. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him. Elena, maybe, years ago, before everything fell apart. Slowly, carefully, his arms came up around Lily's small body. She weighed almost nothing. Skin and bones and courage wrapped in a package barely bigger than a doll. But in that moment, holding his daughter for the first time, Marcus Blackwood felt something shift inside his chest. A door that had been locked for decades finally creaked open, and he swore on everything he had left that he would protect this child until his last breath. The Blackwood estate sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds 40 minutes north of Chicago. High walls surrounded the property. Security cameras watched every angle. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter in rotating shifts. It was a fortress designed to keep enemies out and secrets in. Tonight, it was a war room. Marcus stood at the head of a long mahogany table in the main study, surrounded by the most trusted members of his organization. 12 men who had proven their loyalty through blood and fire. 12 men who would kill or die on his command. Victor Crane has declared war on this family, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. He murdered my wife. He kidnapped my daughter. He attacked the orphanage where she grew up and left a message written in blood. He placed his palms flat on the table. I want him found. Tonight. Whatever resources we have, use them. Whatever favors are owed to us, call them in. I'm offering $200,000 to anyone who brings me Victor Crane's location. Another $200,000 to whoever helps me put him in the ground. The men around the table exchanged glances. $400,000 was a fortune. Victor Crane was a dead man walking. Every informant we have on the streets gets contacted within the hour, Marcus continued. Every camera we have access to gets reviewed. Every warehouse, every safe house, every abandoned building in this city gets searched. Daniel stepped forward with a tablet in his hands. We might already have something. One of our contacts in the South Side spotted a man matching Victor's description entering an abandoned factory in the industrial district 3 hours ago. He turned the tablet to show Marcus a grainy surveillance image. A figure with a distinctive limp walking through a rusted gate. The old Henderson steel plant. It's been empty for years. Perfect place to hide. Marcus studied the image. How many entrances? 3 that we know of. Main gate, loading dock, and an emergency exit on the north side. Guards? None. The property was seized by the city 5 years ago. Nobody's been inside since. Marcus straightened up and looked at his men. I'm going alone. The room erupted in protest. Boss, that's suicide. At least let us provide backup. Victor's insane. You can't face him without enough. Marcus's voice silenced them all. This is personal. Victor wants me, not you. If I bring an army, he'll disappear again. If I go alone, he'll be waiting. He turned to Daniel. Your job is to protect Lily. If I don't come back, you take care of her. You raise her right. You keep her away from this life. Understood? Daniel's jaw tightened. Marcus understood? A long pause. Understood. Marcus left the study and climbed the stairs to the second floor. Lily's room was at the end of the hallway, guarded by 2 men who stepped aside as Marcus approached. He opened the door silently and slipped inside. She was asleep. The bedside lamp cast a soft glow across her face, highlighting the bruises that were finally starting to fade. Her breathing was slow and steady, peaceful in a way she probably hadn't been for months. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to wake her. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and a pen from the nightstand. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote, Lily, if you're reading this, it means I didn't come back. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the 8 years I wasn't there. I'm sorry I didn't know you existed. I'm sorry your mother suffered because of my selfishness. Daniel will take care of you now. He's a good man. Better than me. Let him protect you. Let him give you the life I never could. You deserved a better father. But for what it's worth, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you, Dad. He folded the letter and placed it on her pillow, beside her sleeping head. Then Marcus Blackwood stood, walked out of the room, and disappeared into the darkness. Alone, ready to face the ghost he had created 8 years ago. The Henderson steel plant loomed against the night sky like the skeleton of some ancient beast. Rust had eaten through the walls. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets. The air smelled of decay and forgotten industry, thick with the ghosts of workers who had punched their time cards here decades ago. Marcus entered through the main gate, making no effort to hide his approach. He wanted Victor to know he was coming. The factory floor was a maze of abandoned machinery and collapsed catwalks. Marcus moved through the darkness with his gun drawn, following the faint glow of light that flickered somewhere in the depths of the building. He found Victor in what had once been the foreman's office. The room had been transformed into something nightmarish. Photographs covered every wall, hundreds of them. Pictures of Marcus leaving restaurants. Pictures of Elena walking through the gardens of their estate. Pictures of Lily playing in the orphanage courtyard, unaware that she was being watched. Newspaper clippings about Marcus's business dealings hung beside police reports about Elena's accident. Maps of Chicago were marked with red circles indicating every property Marcus owned. Notes scrawled in jagged handwriting filled the spaces between images. It was a shrine, an altar built to hatred itself, and in the center of it all stood Victor Crane. You came alone, Victor said, turning slowly to face Marcus. The scarred half of his face twisted into something resembling approval. You learned something in these 8 years after all. Marcus lowered his gun. I learned that some things matter more than survival, such as family, love, the chance to be something other than a monster. Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family? You abandoned my sister after using her for one night. Love? You let your wife die without ever knowing she was keeping your daughter's secret from you." He stepped forward, and Marcus saw the knife in his hand. The same knife from their first confrontation, still stained with his blood. "You're no different from me, Marcus. We're both creatures of violence, both destroyers. The only difference is that I'm honest about what I am." "You're wrong." Marcus set his gun on a nearby table. "He wouldn't need it. You took my wife from me. You tried to take my daughter, but you failed, Victor. Lily is safe. She's protected, and you will never touch her again." Victor's dead eye seemed to glow in the dim light. "Then let's finish what we started." He lunged. The fight was nothing like their first encounter. There was no hesitation, no calculation, no holding back. Victor attacked with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. His blade slashed through the air, aiming for Marcus's throat, his chest, his face. Marcus dodged and countered, absorbing blows that would have crippled him days ago. His wounded shoulder screamed in protest. Blood seeped through his bandages, but he didn't stop. Every time Victor's knife came close, Marcus saw Lily's face. Every time his body wanted to surrender, he remembered the promise he had made. Victor slammed Marcus against a wall, pressing the knife toward his neck. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Victor hissed. Marcus grabbed Victor's wrist with both hands. "I didn't kill you then because my daughter was watching." He twisted hard, feeling bones crack beneath his grip. "She's not watching now." With a violent surge of strength, Marcus broke free of Victor's hold. He grabbed the scarred man by the throat and the back of his head, and twisted. The snap echoed through the empty factory like a gunshot. Victor's body went limp. His knife clattered to the floor. His good eye stared at nothing, but his ruined lips were frozen in a smile. "You're more like me than you know." The words faded into silence. Victor Crane was dead. Marcus stood alone in the shrine of hatred, his hands covered in blood, his body screaming with pain. But inside, for the first time in years, he felt something like peace. The nightmare was finally over. 1 week later, Marcus Blackwood made the announcement that shook Chicago's underworld to its core. He was stepping down. The meeting took place in the same study where he had planned Victor's death. The same 12 men sat around the mahogany table, their faces frozen in disbelief as Marcus delivered the news. "Daniel will take over all operations effective immediately. Every contact, every territory, every business arrangement now goes through him." "Boss, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Marcus looked around the room at the men who had served him for years. Killers, thieves, soldiers in a war that never ended. "I built this empire because I didn't know what else to do with my life. I had no family, no purpose, nothing to live for except power and money." He glanced toward the doorway, where Lily was waiting with a guard. "That changed. I have a daughter now, and she deserves a father who comes home every night, not a crime lord who might end up in prison or a body bag." The men exchanged uncertain glances, but nobody argued. Daniel stood and extended his hand. "I'll take care of things, brother. You have my word." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "I know you will." 3 days later, Detective Sarah Mitchell appeared at the estate. She found Marcus in the garden, watching Lily chase butterflies across the manicured lawn. The bruises had faded from the child's face. She was laughing now, a sound that seemed impossible just weeks ago. "Mr. Blackwood." Marcus turned. "Detective." Sarah stood beside him, her eyes following Lily as she ran through the flowers. "Victor Crane was found dead in the Henderson steel plant. Someone broke his neck. There were no witnesses, no forensic evidence, no leads whatsoever." Marcus said nothing. "I know you did it," Sarah continued quietly. "I can't prove it. I probably never will. But I wanted you to know something." She paused. "For once, I think justice was actually served." Marcus watched his daughter pluck a rose from a nearby bush. "I don't care about justice, Detective. I only care about her." Sarah nodded slowly. "Take care of that little girl, Blackwood. She's been through enough. I intend to." The detective left without another word. That afternoon, Marcus drove Lily to a quiet cemetery on the outskirts of the city. Elena's grave sat beneath an old oak tree, surrounded by roses she had loved so much in life. The headstone was simple white marble engraved with her name and the words "beloved wife and angel of street Marys." Lily stood before the grave, clutching a single red rose in her small hands. "This is where the pretty lady is?" "Yes. This is where Elena rests." Lily knelt and placed the rose gently against the headstone. "Can you tell me about her? What was she like?" Marcus crouched beside his daughter, his eyes fixed on the name carved in stone. "She was the best person I ever knew. Kind, compassionate, She believed in redemption even when everyone else had given up. His voice grew thick. And she loved you, Lily. She loved you from the moment she helped bring you into this world. Every visit to the orphanage, every hug, every tear she shed was because she loved you like her own child. Lily's speaking eyes glistened. I think she would be happy that you found me. Marcus looked at his daughter. At those eyes that Elena had described so perfectly years ago. Eyes that could see truth. Eyes that could speak without words. I think she sent you to me, Marcus whispered. I think she's been watching over both of us this whole time. Lily took her father's hand. Together, they stood before Elena's grave as the afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. Then they turned and walked away. A father and daughter, a family forged in tragedy but bound by love. Their road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges and setbacks and days when the past would haunt them both. But for the first time in either of their lives, they were not walking alone. And so, dear friends, our story comes to an end. But the lessons it carries live on in our hearts. This tale reminds us that no matter how far we have fallen, redemption is always possible. That love can bloom in the darkest places. That family is not just about blood, but about the choices we make and the people we refuse to abandon. Marcus Blackwood spent 37 years building walls around his heart. It took one brave little girl to tear them down. If his story teaches us anything, it is this. It is never too late to become the person you were meant to be. It is never too late to choose love over fear, family over power, purpose over emptiness. Look at your own life today. Is there someone you have neglected? A relationship you have let fade? A chance for connection you have been too afraid to take? Perhaps this story is the gentle reminder you needed. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We would love to know how you felt about Marcus and Lily's journey. Does their story remind you of anything in your own life? Have you ever experienced a moment where love changed everything? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts from the depths of your heart. We read every single one, and your words inspire us to keep creating. Thank you for being part of our community. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves and the ones you love. Until we meet again.